Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a seriously provocative documentary that questions the literal foundation of our modern education system. You know the drill, right? Go to school, get good grades, secure a degree, and you're set for life. But what if that whole script is actually a brilliantly designed historical trap? According to the source material we're digging into today, the current system wasn't actually built to make you successful or independent. Nope, it was explicitly engineered to make you obedient. So let's dive right in and see exactly how the documentary breaks down this wild argument.
The source kicks things off by pointing out a really fascinating contrast. Look at the billionaire path. Guys like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Gautam Adani. The documentary highlights a huge common denominator here. They all actively bypassed, or just straight up stepped off, the traditional educational conveyor belt. But then there's the average path, the one almost all of us proudly walk right into. We aim for 90% attendance, we memorize the textbooks, we follow every single rule, all hoping for some magical payoff at the end. So it really begs the question, why do the world's most successful people avoid the very system the rest of us completely rely on?
To figure that out, the documentary argues we actually need to look at how the system functions for the average person today. Let's hit Section 1, the modern education trap.
According to the source, this trap operates as a totally relentless four-step cycle. Step 1, you grind for 15 years to get that piece of paper, your degree. But then reality hits. You enter the job market, face endless rejections, and maybe even get mocked by your relatives. So out of pure desperation, you jump to Step 2 and take a low-salary job. But hey, that salary isn't enough to buy a house outright, right? So on to Step 3, drowning in home and car loans, what we call EMIs in places like India. And that brings us to the final permanent stage, the fear of firing. The documentary points out that once you're chained to those loans, your confidence just tanks. You're so terrified of losing your paycheck that you quietly suppress your dreams, show up, and follow orders whether you actually like the job or not.
And you know, people are starting to wake up to this cycle. The documentary drops a staggering statistic here. In the US alone, over 500,000 people outright refuse to send their kids to traditional schools. 500,000. And the real kicker? According to the source, a huge chunk of these parents are teachers themselves. They literally see behind the curtain every single day. They see how it acts like a giant conveyor belt, ignoring individual talents and just demanding mass compliance.
So if this system is basically a trap, who built it and why? The documentary takes us on a crazy historical detour in Section 2, Origins of Obedient Workers.
The argument here is that our modern classroom definitely wasn't an accident. It was shaped by a very specific timeline. It kicks off in 1806 with a military defeat in Prussia, ramps up massively during the Industrial Revolution, and then gets exported to places like India in 1835. Let's break down exactly what went down at these critical moments.
Okay, so it's 1806. Prussia has one of the best armies in the world, but they lose a major war to Napoleon. Why? Well, Prussian leaders allegedly realized their soldiers lost because they were actually using their brains. They were thinking independently in combat instead of just blindly following orders. So, to make sure that never happened again, they invented the Prussian education system. As you can see, this was an 8-year compulsory schooling model, and its explicit goal was not to create free thinkers. Absolutely not. The goal was to eradicate the student's will. They wanted to brainwash kids from ages 5 to 13 so they'd become mindless, obedient soldiers who just followed orders without asking a single question.
Now here's where the idea spread like wildfire. Enter the Industrial Revolution. The economy is shifting from farming to factories, but there's a huge problem, a massive shortage of factory workers. I mean, why would an independent farmer want to go do grueling labor in someone else's factory? The documentary explains that the big corporate guys of the era saw how well the Prussian system worked and basically adopted it globally. They didn't want independent entrepreneurs. They desperately needed millions of compliant factory laborers. By putting kids through this system, they effectively killed their creativity, brainwashing them into thinking their only option in life was to clock in and work for a paycheck.
Which brings us right into Section 3, the British Master Plan. Let's see how this exact model was imported to India.
The British had a very similar problem. They had a massive population to control, but barely any British personnel to actually do it. The documentary pulls up this genuinely chilling quote from Thomas Babington Macaulay in 1835, which basically became the foundation of the English Education Act. The goal was to engineer a specific class of people, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. The source argues the British definitely weren't trying to uplift the population out of the goodness of their hearts. They were deploying a tweaked version of that Prussian model to create a completely subservient class.
And the result of that 1835 act? The total systematization of obedience. The documentary claims this system was perfectly crafted to produce loyal clerks for their offices and soldiers for their armies. It was so effective that people were essentially brainwashed into believing that corporate compliance and following the rules was their highest purpose in life. And the source argues this isn't just history. Even today, parents proudly send their kids to super expensive schools for the status without realizing the whole shebang is still geared toward creating a compliant worker who respects authority, works insane hours, and just waits for a paycheck.
Okay, so how does all this 19th century history translate to today's reality? Let's jump to Section 4, the reality of degrees.
The documentary backs up its historical claims with some incredibly harsh modern statistics from the International Labor Organization. Look at this data. A whopping 65% of the youth in India are jobless. On top of that, 42% of graduates under 25 are completely unemployed. People are literally spending millions of rupees and dedicating a quarter of their lives to this system, only to end up desperately begging for jobs that pay a fraction of what they put into it. It's wild.
To really drive home how devalued these traditional degrees have become, the source points out a pretty surprising and honestly kind of depressing contrast. An average truck driver in the US makes roughly 10 times more than an average engineer in India. The documentary uses this to totally shatter the illusion that getting a tough traditional degree automatically equals financial stability. In today's globalized economy, that's just not a guarantee anymore.
And you know, we always hear that getting into an elite, top-tier college means you're set for life, right? Well, the documentary pulls data from 2023 showing that dozens of students at premier IIT campuses, like 36 at IIT Bombay, 40 at Delhi, and 31 at Kanpur, completely failed to get placed. The source uses this to prove that the old mindset of a prestigious degree automatically unlocking a massive salary is just falling apart. The conveyor belt is literally breaking down, even at the very top.
All right, so if the system is broken, what's the fix? Let's look at the source's proposed solution in Section 5, Breaking the Cycles.
The documentary lays out some really clear, actionable advice to break out of this centuries-old trap. First off, stop obsessing over marks and grades. They're just metrics from a broken system. Second, get out there and focus on real-world exposure. There is way more to life than just memorizing a textbook. Third, skip the purely theoretical route and learn high-value skills online, straight from actual practitioners who are out there doing the work. And finally, actually dedicate time to exploring your true passions. The source makes such a good point here. Kids will easily take a drop year to study for brutal entrance exams like JEE or NEET, but almost nobody takes a year off just to figure out what they actually care about.
So this explainer leaves us with the documentary's ultimate provocative challenge. The facts are out there, you've seen the historical origins and the current data showing the system's massive flaws. So, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay stuck in a historical trap, living paycheck to paycheck in fear and just accepting an average life? Or are you going to break the rules, step off the conveyor belt, and actually build your own path? It's a fascinating question for sure. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the systems around you.